going on that. Well, man, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Nice to have another military in the house.
Yeah, we just talked about that this week, didn't
Yes,
we?
we did.
Yeah. Need to get him here. Well, I'm going to shift gears tonight in a big way. We'll see if you like it when I'm done.
Here we go.
I am going to talk about money.
Here we go.
And what am I going to talk about? I'm not going to talk about money. I'm going to talk about vision and righteousness. And I'm going to use scriptures that we use to get offerings out of people. Maybe you will never give again. I don't know when I'm done with this tonight. I have a couple things floating around inside of me. One, I've got something. I got three things actually right now. I'm back on this one new man thing. I really feel like that's what, well, we'll get into that in a little bit. Then I also feel like I'm into this thing of iniquity that's creating atmosphere. So I'm going to teach that in the school in 2 or 3 weeks on a Monday night. That'll be the class. But then I'm also looking at kingdom finance of why are we not able to finance the things we need to do? And then as we give money into things, do we understand why we're giving in an offering? And you can probably say, well, yeah, we need an offering to pay the bills and pay the rent and do that, and that's not why we need the offering. That has nothing to do with it. It actually comes out of an overflow of your righteousness, is actually how you're supposed to be giving your offering. In the Old Testament, they took up offerings for different things. It really was 5 things that they did. There was a burnt offering, which is an atonement for sin. There was a grain offering, which is your devotion towards God. There was a peace offering to try to bring fellowship between parties. There was a sin offering, which I think we all understand that, and a guilt offering. And the reality is when Jesus came, he was those 5 offerings. He completed all of those offerings as the final offering. And so in the Old Testament, they would tithe, which we all know that word, but yet you can't seem to find that word in the New Testament. So then when we tithe, are we actually doing something biblical? See, this makes, oh boy, this gets quiet, doesn't it?
Yep.
You're all waiting for the other side of this. So how did they do things in the New Testament? It's really what we're looking at. How did they do things to advance the kingdom in the New Testament? Because a shift happened from old to new, and a paradigm happened in everyone's life that suddenly something was brand spanking new and the new way of doing things. And the primary way that you see them taking offerings in the New Testament is they gave it to their leaders. See, this is where it gets quiet. And why does it get quiet? Because I make that statement, because most of our leaders don't have the integrity to handle an offering. So we get real quiet about, oh my God, am I going to give it to you? I don't know if you have the integrity or the character to handle the offering, but I would rather give it to an institution. I'd rather give it to somebody that I don't have any relationship with instead of somebody I have relationship with. And that's how they gave their offering. Their offering was given to the apostles because the apostles knew how to distribute it and give it out where it needed to go. And their primary role was to advance the kingdom. Where today, when we take offerings, a lot of times the primary role is to build an idol. To restructure a building that doesn't need to be remodeled. To buy carpet that doesn't need to be recarpeted. And so we created this thing in churchdom that's pretty much unbiblical in a lot of ways. And what happens is as we give offerings, like we haven't taken the offering tonight, but I know some people have thrown some money in. But the reality is if I say we're going to take an offering, your mindset automatically goes, this is going to pay the light bill. This is going to pay the insurance. It's going to pay all the things that you pay every month at your house. That's what our mindset is. But yet the mindset of an offering, the offering is to advance the kingdom, period.
Yes, yes it is.
And there's things that are associated with advancing the kingdom. Like this building. We're renting a space to advance the kingdom. And if we don't use this space, there's no point renting it. If we don't use the space sitting on the other side, there's no point in having it. And if we, it's like, where is the things that we have done to advance the kingdom with what we've been given? These are tools. This room is a tool. Those rooms across the way are tools. And if those tools are not things that we are advancing the kingdom with, then we need to get rid of them. But then they've been given. So as we came here to Des Moines, we decided that we needed to establish a beachhead in the city, in the region, in the territory. And part of that is to have a presence. So we said, let's have a presence in the city, because we started out doing meetings in schools. And we said, that's good, but we have no presence in a city. So we said, let's rent a space so we can advance the kingdom. And that pretty much came through me, in all honesty, of saying we need to have our own place. Josh and me got really tired of packing the gear in and out and setting it up every week. And we had all kinds of people busy setting gear up, but we were like, man, this is getting old. And our stuff is getting tore up. And we're not being good stewards, and we need a presence in the city. And so we said, let's set up camp. Let's find a place, set up camp. And that kind of, as the leader, it all comes down onto me, because I'm the one that made the final decision in it. And I went to a pastor's meeting. I felt I was to go to this pastor's meeting. And I went there for almost 3 months. I couldn't figure out, what in the world am I doing here? And finally a guy said, hey, I know where there's some space. Are you looking for some space? And I said, yeah, I am. And that's how we ended up in this building. And we put a beachhead in. And then through that, we decided there was other things that we needed to do. Like we decided we needed to stream. And we put in the streaming. And I decided we need to blog. And we put in some blogging and writing books. And we decided we'd have conferences. And we decided that we would do different things. And then Josh moved his studio into the other side, so that we could record music and we could do stuff like that. And he's done a little bit of that, but now we're not doing so much of that. And then we put an art room on the other side, and Kathy was doing something with that, but then we're not doing so much with that. So it's like, so are these, what's going on with the tools and the things that we've structured to all advance kingdom? Because your offering that you throw in every week is more than just you're throwing something in to pay bills. It's actually connected to the intention of all of the ministries and things that we got going on here. It is to pay for the stream. It's to buy a better camera. It's to make that dynamic and do it in the spirit of excellence. It's to set something in place where we can do the things that are going to make a difference kingdom-wise. And if you don't have that mindset, then you've been giving your offering in a totally wrong way. If you're just thinking you're helping to pay bills, you should probably not even give your offering. Now, hopefully you still give your offering. Because if you don't give it, then I'll pay it. And I'll figure a way to pay it, because that's what I've done before. And that's why I was working a job for those years. To keep things in motion that I knew God had said need to be in motion. See, Paul told the Corinthians, he literally, if you read it, he literally said to them, you owe me money. But I'm going to go ahead and do ministry even though you don't pay me. Even though you should be paying me. And the Philippians saw what was going on. And the Philippians, which I can read it to you in a little bit, the Philippians were looking for the opportunity to sustain Paul in what he was doing. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I'm not trying to get money for myself tonight, all right? It's not what I'm talking about. Paul got money from a couple different ways. Maybe I ought to get on my notes here.
I didn't have any.
Well, I haven't had any here to this point. I want to make sure that they get this. I can flip over here to 2 Corinthians 9 in a moment. Well, that's where we're going to camp. But they did things consistently, constantly, and sacrificially. That's literally what they did. They were very consistent in their giving so that they could plan the strategies that they needed to plan to advance the kingdom. And they were very constant in their giving, meaning that they were trying to find new avenues of ways to give to advance the kingdom, because the kingdom was burning inside of them. They weren't giving offerings because it's offering time or to get a blessing. They were giving it knowing that that was going to fuel the advance of the kingdom in the earth, and it was going to create the atmospheres. It was going to create fivefold ministry people. It was going to create opportunities. It was going to shift culture. They knew it was going to have an impact. So they were trying to figure out ways that they could give. So it was like, let's sell our houses and our lands and let's give. Let's remove the hindrance out of the advance of the kingdom going forward. I love our landlord. He's told me, he said, we will never let money stand in the way of the kingdom and the gospel being advanced. Money should never be an issue in his mindset. He just raised $377,000 this week out of 100 people to build churches. You don't think there's money around for cause? The problem is we aren't giving an accurate vision of what we're doing. There's people that are looking for places to drop money upon us. You see, you're freaking out because you think you got to do it all. You don't. You just got to know the right people, but you got to have the right vision inside of you of why you might be asking them, could you give something to help us do such and so? I was shocked when I asked for, the recording gear stuff is all sitting back there in that cart. I was shocked. In 23 hours, I'd raised $2,000 on Facebook. I said I should have raised $10,000 for myself. Need some more money. And I said I want to go to Nigeria, and I had 2 people already wanted to give $100, and I haven't even put a plea out. People want to give, but they want to give into a vision that has kingdom in it that says it's going to advance. I told you it'd be a little different, didn't I? In Acts 4:34, they laid the offering at the apostles' feet. I've had that happen. I had that happen in Nigeria at a church where I stood and they buried me up to my knees, almost up to my waist in money. And they had to collect it in garbage bags. And it's like, this is insane, you know? Don't worry, I'm going to move right along. But they laid it at the apostles' feet in Acts 4. And they sold land and brought the money, and they laid it again at the apostles' feet. And then Ananias and Sapphira come along, and they lay it again at the apostles' feet. It seemed to be a pattern that was starting to emerge in the New Testament, that they were giving it to the leaders that had been assigned by God to lead in a region or a territory or even a nation. So Paul received support by 2 ways. He received it as a father leading and investing in sons and daughters. And he received it as an apostle doing kingdom assignment. That was literally the 2 places the giving went into the church in the early days. And the one, it basically kind of came like this. The sons and daughters were basically supporting the living of him as an apostle, taking care of himself. You know, theologians say that Paul was probably married because he got denied access into the temple as a Pharisees, because you had to be married to go into the temple as a Pharisees. And he was denied access. So he had a wife that he was taking care of. He could have had children. We don't know. There's no writing on any of this stuff. But he was taking care of his needs. But he did the tent making for a short season, because the expectation was, then he says it, if I'm going to make my living doing this, then this should be providing for me. There should be enough to provide for me. But then the thing of assignments, as he went out, the church sacrificially gave. They sold what they needed to sell. They did what they needed to do, that the kingdom could advance and they could go forward. So when you're giving at the base, you're giving into the assignment that the base has. And tonight it was like, I was thinking about it, it's like, do we really know the assignment? We moved here to bring awakening and reformation into the state. That was the reasoning of coming up here. And then this group, we're talking about community, we're talking about honor, we're talking about this and that, we're wanting a move of God. And it's like, where's the presence of God and all? It's like we're contending for a bunch of stuff, and I could lump that together in one statement, one new man. It's like we're forming one new man, one expression of Christ in our midst. And through the one expression, the assignment is to bring that expression of awakening and reformation into the state, start to shift culture, start to shift perspectives. And we're seeing that with all the little pockets of prayer and stuff that's going on. Devin up there in Dubuque, and the Harmons over in Davenport, and different ones, and Michelle in Cedar Rapids. It's like we're seeing the beginnings of what we came here to do, but it also got to be fueled with some finance. You all doing all right?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's good. You won't be in a little bit. So what is a storehouse? Because that's Old Testament. It's out of Malachi. Bring all the tithe into the storehouse. Well, the word storehouse means treasury. It means filled with treasure. It means a temple, a place of worship for the nation. It also means a place of armory and weaponry, where you store up your weapons and your AKs and everything. Your M16. Depends what nation you are. We know about them AKs, don't we, Tim?
I've actually been less threatened in the military than I was in Nigeria.
I guarantee it. Oh, but then a house, what is a house? It's a dwelling, it's a habitation, it's a family. So basically what he says, bring the tithe into the place where you're getting substance back and where there's relationship. There's a relationship that's going on. But then we go into the New Testament, we start seeing that basically we see that Jesus, he provided for his whole team. This is challenging for me. I'm supposed to provide for 12 people in ministry. Holy smokes, I can't even do myself right now. Paul was providing for every team that he went out with and believing for them. Well, was it because his faith was so great, or was it because it's Jesus and he was able to provide? Or was it because the people saw vision of what this was really about, and they invested into the vision financially and gave so that they could go out and do these missions? In Luke 8:2, it says, a certain woman, which had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of them 7 devils, and Jonah, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others, which ministered unto him of their substance. They were the ones taking care of Jesus. It literally was a bunch of women taking care of him, doing things. Probably, it's like Paul with Tabitha and, selling purple and cloth and this and that. Some of them were probably running businesses to support the kingdom's advancing. I have a business. I want to sell my business. You know what I've thought about a lot? This business should be turned over to the base, and the people here ought to run it and figure out how to make a pile of money out of it. But you see, if I'm going to sell it, and I guarantee the person that buys it, you know what they're all telling me? We're going to scale it 5 to 6 times. You know how much money that thing could make at a scale of 5 to 6 times? Could clear $250,000 a year. Why are we not doing that? Why do we let the world make the finance that we need to have to finance what we need to do? It's because we don't have vision. Because we don't see what that can do to advance the kingdom. How many people could be put into full-time ministry through that kind of a process, and then that thing starts to ignite something, because the problem is none of us have much time. It's really the main issue, isn't it? Romans 16:1. Paul said, I commend unto you Phoebe? My eyes are there. Which is a servant of the church. And then he says, a sister in whatsoever business she has need of you. He basically says, oh, I'm going to throw another one in the mix and you need to support her. You need to figure out a way to support her. I've seen the abuse of all of this. Don't worry, I've seen the abuse in the other end, like the expectation of, I need 7 cars and 2 homes and all kinds of weird stuff, you know. But Paul had an expectation that what he was called to do, he would get support. Our landlord has told me, he constantly is asking me, well, where are you at? How many people are coming? What are you doing? What's going on? You know what he's asking? Are you getting results? Because he told me, he said, fill the room, and if you stuff the room out, I'll build you a building. I'll find you a building. I'll do whatever it takes, because we're not going to let finance get in the way of ministry. But he wants to see results, and as a businessman, that's how he thinks. And that's how all these businessmen think. So why could he raise $377,000 with 100 people? Is because those people are business people, but they had a goal of 10,000 churches to build, and they've built 9,000. So with the offering that they did, they're going to be able to build another 300 to 400 churches. And the goal is 10,000 by the next year. That they'll reach 10, and they'll probably reach it. Then their goal, what did he say their goal was? 20? 20,000 in 5 years. 10,000 in 30 years. 20,000 in 5 years. That's kind of aggressive, isn't it? So what are they doing? They're looking for the resources to fund their vision. I'm looking. You ought to be looking. You ought to be looking for resources to fund your vision. You ought to be looking for resources to fund what we're doing. We ought to all be looking. So here's what I put. I put leaders sent by God in the region should be supported by the region. It unlocks the kingdom blessings in heaven to come. And the kingdom will advance at an alarming rate. But when the leaders come into a region that are sent by God and are not honored by being supported, it can close a region up. And I think that's somewhat what goes on. Because people they want to deny that somebody has vision or has a kingdom assignment. And if we were truly kingdom thinking, you know, it's like, I don't know if I'll say, but I was talking with Kathy about funding for the next art thing. Do you want to say anything about who we might give that money to, or maybe I should not? Let's wait.
Okay.
Let's wait. But it's like we're going to try to help fund somebody else do something instead of fund ourselves. Because they're doing something that needs to be funded. And that's coming, you know, hopefully that's coming again. We'll do that again. Philippians 4:10, he says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, but now at the last your care of me has flourished again. He's talking to the Philippians, wherein you were also careful, but you lacked opportunity. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? Philippians were supporting them in a lot of endeavors. And so they desired to bless him to the point they were looking for the opportunity. And then on down in Philippians 4:15, he says, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but ye only. For even in Thessalonica you sent once again unto my necessity. So now he's over at the Corinthians and they're failing. He's over at the Thessalonians and they're failing. And the Philippians have vision and they're saying, we got to support you, what you're doing. We see you're advancing the kingdom into new territories. You all doing all right? So he says on down, he talks about that fruit would abound to your account. He talks about the offering being a sweet-smelling, sacrificial, acceptable, well-pleasing to God. Talks about all of those things. A sweet-smelling is it talks about a fragrant offering, and also the acceptable sacrifice. And when you start to study the word meaning all the way down, it literally correlates. It is identical to the same offering of Christ himself. So the offering they were giving was not ink on a check or a few bucks in a plate. It was correlated that they were offering to the very depths, like Christ offered himself at the cross. They were offering sacrificially to that degree. They were offering in a way that they knew that it would impact. And because of that, it was an acceptable, it was pleasing, it was agreeable. It was literally like God came into agreement with their offering. And the action of their offering then put something into motion. And you know how we do offering a lot of time. Well, let me end this. In other words, I put it like this. When the offering is done right, God views it like unto his Son being an offering that is agreeable and far-reaching to all. Here's how we do an offering. I'll give an offering if the Holy Spirit nudges me to give it. But yet the scripture says, let every man decide what he will give. Newsflash, the Holy Spirit will never nudge you to give an offering. The Holy Spirit may tell you and challenge you to give a certain number in an offering, but he will never nudge you to get your hand in your pocket and empty it. He may say you need to give in this, but he's never going to force you to give it. He's not going to strong arm you to give it. The Bible says, let every man decide what he's going to give and let him be cheerful about how he gives it, not begrudgingly. You decide what you're going to give. And I'm going to tell you, to the degree that you give is literally to the degree you understand how righteous you are in God and how you can engage his covenant, that he can take care of your needs. It literally comes right back to your righteousness. So, if I meddled enough there, what forms the right perspective in giving? So now I want to go to 2 Corinthians 9, and this, I'm now past my introduction. Now I want to get into the message. We could read the entire chapter. And this chapter is all about giving. It's all about offerings, and it's wonderful. I hate strong arm offerings. I just hate them. It's supposed to be giving out of a cheerful heart. I've told people, if you can't give tonight cheerfully, then don't give. Don't put yourself into bondage by doing that. You know? So he talks about ministering to the saints, and if you're all there at 2 Corinthians 9, I'm going to run through the famous offering scriptures. And here's how they go, verse 5. He says, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go before unto you and make up before your bounty. There's the key word, bounty, which already makes us start thinking about offering. And then he says 6, and I say, he which soweth sparingly shall also reap sparingly. He which soweth bountifully shall reap bountifully. And every man according as he purposed in his heart, so let him give. That's what we just talked about. Not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. And as is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness remaineth forever. Now he that ministers seed to the sower, both ministers bread for your food, and multiply your seed sown, and increase the fruits of your righteousness, being enriched in everything to all bountifulness, which causes through us thanksgiving to God. And so it kind of goes like this. Verse 5 is bounty. Verse 6 is sowing. Verse 7 is cheerful. Verse 8 is sufficient. Verse 10 is multiply. And verse 11 is bountifulness. And here's what happened. I was listening to the Bible, driving my truck, and I'm listening to this chapter, and the Lord spoke to me, and he said, you're missing the entire chapter by not seeing what's in verse 9. And in verse 9, he says, it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness remaineth forever. And in the middle of talking about sowing and reaping and bountifulness and giving, is this verse talking about righteousness. That all of those things that we're talking about are acts of righteousness. They're extensions of righteousness coming out of our lives. And he said, his righteousness remaineth forever. Well, your offering don't remain forever. Your offering gets burned up doing something. You know, the electric bill, somebody's going to get your bucks. Something's going to happen. What remains, what's he talking about is not even the finance that it takes. He's talking about something deeper. It's like, what are you supposed to be sowing? You're supposed to be sowing righteousness. You're supposed to be giving righteousness. The bounty that you have is righteousness. The cheerfulness is coming because of righteousness. The sufficiency is because of righteousness. What is being multiplied is righteousness. As you sow righteousness, it's multiplied, and what it becomes is bountiful. Look what happens when we take out and we get fixated on money and what we're giving. It's like you're not going to be able to really give in an offering the way you're supposed to give unless you're first giving and understanding your righteousness in God, and you're giving out of your right standing with God. And that's the reason why you're giving into the offering, is you want other people to come into right standing with God and understand his righteousness. And Paul said, the reason I want you to understand this is that there would be something that goes to your account, not to my account. In other words, he wanted us to have a clarity that we are in right standing, and that right standing has a power in offering, that the offering isn't just paying for fuel to go somewhere or get on a plane to go to Nigeria. It literally is, that offering it's empowering righteousness out of a person's life to be put on display for other people to see, that they might know that the kingdom could advance and they'd have the same opportunity that we have. Now that is a whole different way of looking at an offering. So it's kind of like it does a few things. One, it gets you a new perspective that every dollar you're giving should be creating something. And it should give another perspective on the other side for those that have to steward the offering, that they better be producing something with it. You see what's happening? Are y'all kind of following what I'm saying? So righteousness is about being what? In right standing with God. But you know what the word righteousness is dealing with? It's dealing with two things: sanctification and justification. You have to go into a process of sanctification to be righteous. And you end up in a process of the realization of justification when it's finished. So he's saying, if you really want to understand the impact of your offering, it's going to get of a release in other people's lives to understand they can be justified in God, and they can be sanctified in God, and they can come into wholeness in Christ. So when you look on down, let's see if I can find the other verse here. Yes, he does, right there in verse 8. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you. That's not a grace to give an offering. That's a grace that your righteousness can be empowered by the offering that you give. Always having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. And on down, I think there's another place he talks about righteousness. Let me look at my notes. Fruits of righteousness, verse 10. He says, and increase the fruits of your righteousness. Well, fruit is something that's been produced from a seed that's been sown. So when you're sowing an offering, you're sowing a seed of righteousness. Every time you sow a seed of offering. So it's kind of like he says, I want to increase that seed that was sown. I believe God can multiply money because I've seen him do it. And I believe God can multiply our influence. And this is where we say, well, if you can't go on the mission trip, give to the mission. And it's like you're going on the trip. And people have said that over the years, and they don't even understand that it's literally as if your righteousness has been empowered to go into that trip and go with that person. Because you're seeing the kingdom advancing and you're wanting to see the kingdom advance. And so you're sacrificially giving. And so what they ended up doing is they gave in ways that was untypical to produce the kingdom to come into the earth. Paul was like, I got to go make some tents for a season because we're coming up short. Then he got things moving and they weren't coming up short anymore. I mean, for Paul to travel, in that day, it was like $1 million budget today, if you correlated it to today's standards. He was running around on $1 million budget to travel the places that he traveled and the teams that he traveled with and all of it. That's literally what it comes down to. Now, you see, the problem is back to integrity and character. It's like we don't trust, so we don't give because it's going to be spent amiss. And so we end up just throwing some money into a pan and saying, there's my offering. And we disconnect from the whole reasoning behind it. Completely disconnect from it. Does this make any kind of sense?
Yes, sir.
So when you give from a place of righteousness, you're giving from a place of who you are more than an action of giving. You're giving because it's who you are. You're giving because that's part of being Christ-like. You're giving because it reflects your righteousness. And so I've kind of came to, as I start looking at this and then saying, okay, I got to put this into reality. It's like I can almost see to the degree of our understanding of my right standing with God and that he will supply all of my need according to his riches, need being singular, riches being plural, that he will take care of me when I give. It's because I know I'm in right standing. And then I have confidence and my heart condemns me not. And then I don't sit here with doubt and unbelief that he's not going to take care of me when I gave something in right standing and understand that I'm advancing something that is on his heart and he has came into agreement with it. And now it's going to affect the earth. That's literally how we should be giving our offerings. Isn't that a different way of looking at it? So we'll run through it again for you. Verse 5, bounty. The overabundance of sanctification and righteousness and holy living, verse 6, will be sown not sparingly. And it'll be sown cheerfully from a heart of gratitude and rejoicing because of righteousness. Verse 8, and it will be sufficient and make the grace that's within it to abound as a catalyst for grace to be in action. This is how I'm just ad-libbing this. You see what I'm saying? Getting an understanding of how I would read this. And verse 11, that it would be verse 10, that we would multiply the seed sown, that there would be fruits of righteousness, and it would be bountiful, verse 11, causing thanksgiving and the additional giving of our own selves. You see, it's almost like this. You can't even really give yourself into service unless you know you're in right standing and your life becomes an offering, but I guarantee you probably made some offerings that were very sacrificial before you gave yourself as a sacrificial offering. You did things sacrificially. You know, going to Trip Nigeria, that's a sacrificial thing. Someone's got to pay the bills when somebody checks out of a job. That's sacrificial. It isn't the act of going. It's the other things that come into play that no one thinks about has to come into play. God, I took Tim once.
He sacrifices lunch, I saw it.
Yep, I remember all that.
Yeah, no, you don't. You left us.
Yeah, I sent you to the other side of the nation.
Good fathers do.
Said, go create a story. And now you've got a story to tell.
I lost 10 pounds.
We all lost some weight.
Can I share something real quick?
Yeah, come up here, man.
I don't want you to come
All right,
No, it's on the stream. You have, there's no mic.
just go ahead and then I'll share it back
Can I share something that's not on the stream? Like,
in a little bit.
okay.
That right?
Yeah.
That work?
No.
Yeah.
But if you want something on the stream, so real quick.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about stream people, so when you're talking about all this finance that goes out, so part of the reason I was here, like I said, I opened up my phone, Facebook, I saw Josh's beautiful face. He's playing, he's singing. Ace is doing her thing. She's awesome too. Hey, you guys are, me and Jake, a little beard. But everybody's doing their so I saw that based on the stream. Someone gave to that. That's what pulled. But you guys don't realize there's a polling here. I did not want to come tonight. I'm sorry. I know we just met, Kathy. It's not you, it's me. I feel like we're breaking up already. But here's the thing. I had like the craziest, longest day. I left my house in Ollie at 4 o'clock this morning, which is fine. Drove here, got here, we march out, we do our thing, we knock down doors and all this stuff. Then I led a chapel service. I had 2 Wiccans and 3 Jehovah's Witnesses, and then a whole bunch of other people with all kinds of stuff. And they all want to talk about everything they believe, which is crazy. And I finally get done with that. Like I said, we literally parked the Humvee. I'm just scrolling through Facebook, see Josh's beautiful face. But as soon as I see it, there's a call that goes out. You guys don't realize you've joined yourself with something by the sacrificial offering of being here on a Saturday night. It's easy to look around and go, wow, there's only X number of people. I hate numbers, right? But you don't know how many people are streaming, and you don't know what other people are doing. So I really downplayed the chaplain thing. I actually am a battalion level chaplain. I have 1,000 soldiers that I get. This is 1,000 problems before you get excited. I mean, Kathy, it's a lot, right? But there's 1,000 people. Like that's a lot of ministry, right? That's one person that's connected. And you know where all of my ministry comes from? It comes from the connection that we have. As soon as Julie stood up, I was like, Mom, and then she starts talking about AFib. I'm like, I had no idea. And then she sits down, she goes, Tim's here. I could hear her go, yeah. And it's like there's this connection, right? You've joined. I'm sorry, you're stuck with these people for the rest of your life. So here's the thought. If you're stuck with them, let's take care of them, give to their ministry. But you're not giving to the ministry. You're giving to affect literally thousands of people you've never met. I'm one person. When he mentioned my mom, like briefly, my mom, she's a maniac. She's starting churches in Kansas City. She lives in a town of 400 people in Iowa. She's starting, I don't even know what denomination it even is. It's another African denomination. I don't know how she got hooked up. She's like, yeah, we're just starting this church in Kansas City. You want to go over sometime? I was like, no. She's like, I just came back from Minnesota. She started an international church there. There's one in Davenport she's hooked up with too. She lives on a pig farm. Right? But she's been connected here, and that's called, she's gone out, she's sacrificed, she's offering. Her covering is here. If you ask her where her covering is here, and you guys have never met her. And there's probably hundreds of people, you've met her, you remember her. I won't repeat anything she said, but, so I'm sorry, I hijacked all that. But, yeah, so I just wanted to, we did, but I just want to let you know as he's talking about this, I think it's easy to get lost in all the theology and all the point making that we're making. The whole thing is part of what you're giving and joining yourself is so much bigger than what you see in this room. And I know you're told that, but from somebody that's like from the outside and out there, like in the trenches, literally sometimes, it makes a difference. For me to look up and see that this is still happening, that a call's still going out, that your people are coming on a Saturday night, that gets me fired up and gets me energized. And tomorrow morning when we get up at 4 o'clock again and march out and do the gas chamber, I'll be like, oh man, glad you guys to sleep in. That's all I have to say.
So can you imagine? I took him and Mike Lauer and Josh on a trip to Nigeria for 2 weeks. That was great. It was great. We met McFly and everything. I hope so. You're making me relive a whole lot of things now. I'm just having like flashback after flashback. Yeah, there's some video of it. There is some video. Oh my gosh. All right, I'll finish with one statement. How's that? When your righteousness is in place, your giving is not by obligation, but by alignment and assignment. You see, that's how it is. When your righteousness is in place, your giving is not by obligation, but by alignment to an assignment. And that's, I'm getting some support, monthly support from people that I really appreciate. And it you know what it did for me? It showed that I had value that I didn't realize. And then when the school rolled out and everyone wanted to give to buy equipment, the same thing happened again. I thought I was going to probably have to slowly build over 3 weeks to get enough money, and it came in 23 hours. And when it was done, people were still calling me begging to give. And they still kept sending money because they wanted in on it. And then, when we launched the school last week, was it last week? Last week, gosh, it's been a long time. When we launched the school, there was, we had 49 people on for the first night. I mean, that's a pretty healthy shot of people. But what blew me away is who's from Finland and who's from France and who's from Southern Australia that were on. I know the gal that's from Alaska, but it's like, who are these other people that were on that night? You see, it's like, I don't know. But I know that the stream has touched a lot of people. We average 300 to 400 people will watch this stream tonight. They may not be on now, but they will view the archives of it. Is it closer to 1,000? Yeah. See, so I mean, look how far reaching it is, and that's what he's like. I love what you said, because it's not about us in the room. It's about what's going on outside of here. And see, that's all part of this vision of when you give an offering. It's not just it shouldn't be just to sustain us. It should be to advance us. It literally should be that way. So close this. That means that's done. You got something else to say off stream, don't you? Yeah, that's good. Yep. Well, let's take offering. Take it with an understanding, please. Please do not just throw something in because it's an offering. You hear what I'm saying? Put something in because you understand the whole thing, how deep this is of an offering. It really is. Every time you give an offering. I really want to try to ruin you, so that when you give an offering, that you understand it, what it really means. So we'll just pass the pans. That's what we'll do. We'll pass them tonight, and we'll just go from there. And we thank all the people that were on the stream. We thank you for your support. If you want to give in an offering, you can go to PayPal, and you can give a donation there. And we have people that regularly. Most of you don't know, but I have people that regularly give on PayPal every week. They regularly give every week through PayPal. So, yep, the base iowa.org, you'll find a link for PayPal. That's the best place. Or /donate, yeah. So. All right, let's fellowship. People have had prayer. Anything else, Mr. Tim?